Hi, this is Jeff with Challenger Auto and Truck Service, and this is our first of many to come. That is, why does my car? So today I'm going to go over why does my brakes, or why do my vehicle's brakes squeak and or grind. So I've decided to do this outside of the shop so that way we don't have any background noise, tools, etc., air guns going off, and we can get some further explanation with no interruptions. So the first thing that I'm going to show you on a vehicle is a front brake rotor through a rim and go over that. So I'm going to flip the camera here and come down to this vehicle. So this is a front brake system. This is the brake rotor. This is the brake caliper. This is the outboard brake pad. And then there's an inboard brake pad. And this shiny area of metal is the entire surface in which the brake pad engages. So very important, there's an outside and an inside. So two brake pads per brake rotor. So what creates the squeaking sound? Well, typically what happens is brakes are friction, so an immense amount of heat. So sometimes brakes become overheated. And when they become overheated, the surface here and the brake pad surface becomes glazed. Then the brake pads start to squeak when engaged, especially in high heat situations, stop and go traffic, etc. Now, quality of brake pad is critical, very critical. And the brake work being done is also very critical in how it's done. So sometimes what happens is in the servicing, meaning if your brakes are squeaking after a brake service has been done, it is very critical that a premium brake pad is used. Very important. Nowadays, typically the best types of brake pads are ceramics by a good manufacturer. Companies like Centric, companies like Akabano. The next important thing is that rotor surface that I showed in the picture. When a brake job is done correctly, that rotor A should be machined or B replaced. Now, in order to machine the rotor, the technician needs to do his job correctly, measure the rotor with a micrometer, and then look up the specifications. And why is that? So if your brakes were squeaking and they were very thin, then that brake pad has worn into that rotor, and that rotor will get little high and low spots through it. Maybe not visual to the eye, maybe sometimes they are. When you put a new set of brake pads on, it now has to wear into that rotor. It is critical that that brake pad is fully engaging that rotor. That is how the vehicle will stop properly. The main reasons, now there are multiple reasons in squeaking, but the main reason that we see before a brake job is brakes have been overheated, brake pad material, and or the brake pads are very low and it's time to replace them. Now the grinding, what makes the grinding happen? So I'm going to flip the camera again here. The grinding is when the brake pad here 100% wears down. The brake pad material is bonded to a metal backing. That's the metal backing. When a brake pad wears 100%, all that's left is the metal backing, and it starts to engage that metal brake rotor. So now we have metal to metal friction and a pretty obnoxious grinding sound. Sometimes you get just one area of a brake pad that wears down, and that area starts engaging the rotor. Now, that can happen for a couple different reasons. That can happen because the brake pads have just gotten too low. That can also happen because our caliper is having a problem. The caliper is staying fully engaged when our foot is not on the brake pedal. It can also happen when the brakes haven't been serviced in a long time. And what I mean by serviced is there's moving components. These brake pads sit in a mounting bracket and they have to be able to move in and out in that mounting bracket. The brake caliper on the back side has 2 pins that it moves on typically. Those are lubricated pins. And since there's a lot of heat in braking, that grease breaks down over time, it dries out, and then that caliper can't move freely. The brake pads can't move freely on the slides, and now the pads stay engaged because when you let your foot off the brake pedal, the pads can't relax. Very important when brake service is done is that the mounting bracket is thoroughly cleaned, lubricated, the slide pins are thoroughly cleaned, lubricated. The last noise that I will go over is sometimes there is a moaning sound. Moaning can happen typically from high heat. You typically don't hear moaning until you're right before you're coming to a complete stop or very slow in the parking lot. So you're moving very slow and you hear a hmm. That typically happens, once again, due to maybe excessive heat, due to brake pad material. Heat is critical with brakes. When a new set of brake pads is put on, if the shop is doing their job correctly, the technician needs to take the vehicle out for a good thorough test drive and start the break-in procedure for brake pads. That break-in procedure is typically 10 to 15 stops from low speed. Obviously you want to be on a road where you can drive up to about 10-15 miles an hour and bring the car to a complete stop without overheating the brakes. And then the final part of that test drive is a 40 to 50 mile an hour ease in on the brake pedal. You're not coming to a complete stop, you're just activating the brakes. Very important after the brake service is done. Now there is another type of brake system that you do not see a lot anymore, but it's called a drum brake system. That is from a much older era of vehicles, but there are still some vehicles that are manufactured with the drum brake system. The drum brake system uses a brake drum, not a brake rotor, and there's 2 brake shoes behind there. Now drum brakes typically last much longer than brake pads themselves. You can get squeaking noises from those. Even when the brakes are okay, that's generally due to brake dust. The brake dust can't vent out of the drum, and my belief is drum brake systems should be cleaned and adjusted yearly. That's usually the typical problem with squeaking from drum brakes. Sometimes the brake shoes can get overheated, the shoe surface can crack, and you can clean and adjust and it goes away maybe for a month or 2 and comes back. And the only way at that point to correct that is to redo the drum brakes. Replace the shoes, machine the brake drums, and that typically will get rid of that problem. So this is a good 80 to 90% the calls. It's not 100% the calls. These videos are not meant for full diagnosis. They are meant to give the general majority of the reason causes. So once again, this is Jeff with Challenger Auto, making sure that we can help our clients understand how brakes work and what makes them squeak, grind, and or moan. Thank you so much. Look forward to hearing from you.